have to do introductions because you met us yesterday, so that's us. I'm the guy on the right. We did this just now. So, and this is what I thought the goal was, so that's good. These times aren't exactly right, but stretch goals. We'll talk about pitching tips first, both of us together, and then last time we had so many questions as we went along, we didn't actually sort of break into groups to workshop pitches, but we did it sort of as a bigger group, and this is small enough now that we could do it that way. So anyway, that's generally the goal. And if you're sensing a theme here, it's not easy being green. Kermit the Frog, it's what he likes to say, it's not easy being green, so it fits. So one question you have to ask is sort of why you're pitching, and you said some of your motivations already, and it is to change the world, get more influence. Sometimes I hear like stuff like this. This is what's really motivating people, and that's all fine and good, but when it comes to reporters, they're looking for something different. They're not worried about getting more publicity for your research center. What reporters really want is a story. They want something that's interesting because they do these day in and day out and they get bored themselves, and it's kind of drudgery. And so if you can work on something that interests you, it's a good sign that it's going to interest other people. And they're trying to do something that's interesting for other people because they want people to read it. And the things that are actually interesting for people, at least when you're talking about a general audience, are things that we're naturally, just as people, as humans, interested in. And that's a story. So that's a character. And we like drama, we like intrigue, we like conflict, we like underdogs. We like those sorts of things are things that just the human brain just gets excited about just naturally. And my suggestion is that you actually take what you have and you just look at what you're trying to pitch and look for those attributes. Look for what's in this story that could be interesting or could turn on somebody's brain. I asked a reporter friend of mine what she is thinking when she gets pitches, and these are her questions. Who's the lead character, right? She thinks about it as stakes and tension and conflict and somebody winning or losing. What's the company's journey? How often do you use the word journey in an academic paper?
Have one with the title. It's in the title.
All right. Did you hear that?
What?
He had the word journey in a title of a paper, so that's good.
You spent all the time critiquing the use of journey in your reporting, because they never actually do anything. They just say they're on a journey.
So, all right. Data-driven thing, yeah. So those are the questions that she's asking, and I think one way to sort of just tune into this kind of thinking is just to listen to yourself and listen to other people. If you're talking about a paper and you go home and you talk to your spouse, what do you tell them? And if the sort of stuff that you think that you naturally tell them is not in what you're sending out to as a pitch to editors or so, that's probably a problem, because it could be that it's proprietary, conflict with your fellow researcher thing, that obviously isn't going to be a public thing, but just train yourself to naturally tell people about what you do, what makes people ask follow-up questions when you tell them what you're working on. Those are just things to think about. That's the kind of just mental agility you want to keep replicating when you send a pitch out. What do you naturally tell people? What do people naturally want to know when they ask you follow-up questions about what you're doing? Listen to that kind of stuff. And then the other thing is what are the moments of drama and comedy in your research? Did your study almost get destroyed because So like a dream would be like your study almost got destroyed because your building automatically shuts down for a week in the summer to save on heating costs, to save, or cooling costs to save the environment or something like that. Like if there's something like that sort of detail, like that's just interesting, and it's always nice to put those kind of details in. So a lot of things that just get taken out of academic journals are things that you just need to think like what else is part of this story that actually might need to go into the story. So these are, I'll call these tropes of just ways to get into, ways to, just different types of stories that reporters are used to getting. This is a tough thing. Reporters and editors, they're always finding a balance between doing something they know and something that's comfortable, and also trying to do something different or learn something new. And so, for some people, maybe, and we'll send all these slides out afterwards, so you'll get all this, but for some people, maybe your first time trying to get your research out or what you have to say out is not necessarily in a study that you did or research that your research center came out with, but maybe it's just saying, we have this great speaker who is really good on this topic. Let's just offer this person as an expert to weigh in on news stories that are happening around these topics. So that way it's not necessarily about what you're doing first, but it is a way into, it doesn't have to be your story, you can still raise awareness for what you're doing by getting somebody in that way. So I think just think about like how can you become more involved and meet your goals, and what's the best way to do that? And maybe writing about an article or a research article is not the best way. There are people, by the way, like people like Malcolm Gladwell, who've done a really good job of taking this language that is in academic journals and translating it into storytelling for a general audience. And it's a lot of work. So maybe there are ways to start doing that without like trying to do it all at once.
Yeah, on the experts weighing in thing, reporters are inundated with experts about whatever the topic is. Oh, I have so and so expert in X, Y, Z, but they're not really experts, or they're just really about their brand or about it's a marketing exercise. And so when reporters hear about or get a solicitation from a real expert saying, or when I get something from say a communication team for writing an article, this just happened. Tariffs just issued. We have these 3 experts who study trade and policy and who are willing to write for you or are willing to comment on the story. I think reporters really like it when they get that kind of message because that helps them and saves them time. They don't have to search for the expert; they have them. And from your perspective, these even if it's just like a comment in a story, there's so much misinformation out there. I mean, I think it's a duty that real experts in academia have to make sure they're part of the conversation, whether it's writing a story or being in a story, and making sure that the reporter understands the story better and writes the right story that has nuance and everything else. So
yeah.
Is there a centralized
right.
place you can say, hey, there's an expert, so that most reporters can come to you as opposed to having to chase down?
There are experts, like Scholars Strategy Network is one.
Help a reporter out. It may depend on your national market too. It could be different, but there are websites where you do that. And of course, many of you are
strategy outlets.
Scholars Strategy Network. I don't know how they work exactly, but when I have a story and we were looking for somebody to write on a topic, somebody there will send me here are some people who are part of our network and who could potentially comment. So they just do a search and they find people who match the story.
And many of you are working with media relations teams at your university or at your research center. So there are people to be friends with too for that. And in the same way that I'm talking now about like how to approach a reporter, you may want to use the same sort of thinking when you're trying to those comms people. You have lots of faculty members, there are lots of researchers, and they're all yeah, everybody's got working papers, so which one is the one that they're gonna tell the reporters that they have relationships with about? So getting to know them, or how they think and what they're looking for and how they work is also analogous to going to reporters directly.
And those relationships really matter. So if they know that you're reliable, that you will write the story when they tell the reporter or editor, or do the thing, and they tell them that you're available, they will more likely go back to you. But if you burn that person, if you don't write the story or you're not really available and everything, they'll probably try to find somebody else because they value that relationship you have with the reporter or the editor as well.
Yeah, so a big underline under the word relationships, right? This is like pitching stuff. This is about ideas, but it's about people. There are people who are controlling all of this. So this is using your communication strategies, organizational behavior thinking. A couple of just quick things that I'll run through here. Who should you pitch to? You don't have to hit everybody at once. If you have a paper, you might want to just figure out what's one place I can focus on to try to get this published at, or where can I, and then you want to ask why are they the one? Or do this the other way around. What do I have? What's interesting? Do I have visual stuff? Is this really exciting because it's about research on an island in the South Pacific Sea, and it's just beautiful? Do I want to, are there pictures involved? Who would want to publish something like that? You want to think about what you have and who you want to reach, who the gatekeepers are for that, and and go for that. I personally like email for pitching, by the way, just for receiving stuff, because life of a reporter or an editor is that you come in and news has happened, and so you're trying to find people to write about something like that day. You also want some blocks of time where you can just write. We get maybe a dozen pitches an hour from people who are just sending us stuff, saying, offering experts, mentioning companies and products, or such and such CEO is a really good speaker about this, this, and this. And so it's kind of overwhelming. And so I like email because I can deal with it in batches. I can search for it later. And then I look for a couple of things in an email, which I'll get to in just a second.
So emails rather than attachments? Is that the...
Attachments are okay, but definitely put it in. Nobody wants to open and then...
Okay.
And there's security concerns.
Security concerns too. Is there a virus attached? Is this really coming from that person, this researcher I don't know, in this country I don't know? Especially if you're from Nigeria, and I know we have a researcher from
Are you
here,
going to into length of the
about that.
pitches, or are you going to talk about the
Yes.
length of the pitches?
Yeah. Keep it simple and readable, kind of in one glance. Yeah. No problem. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is just also think about when to do this. If you have a paper, you have nice long timelines often in the work that you do, so why take those away from the people that you're working with? If you've got a new report or a study, don't tell somebody the day before it comes out, just because they may be on vacation that week, or they have longer timelines for taking it to different people. If it's going in a magazine at HBR, it's going to take a lot longer. So,
and we're used to dealing with embargoed research, so if there's an embargo, that actually can be appealing in some ways. It's embargoed. Oh, is it something I should be aware of? Is it something that my competitors will have?
Everybody knows what's an embargo. Obviously, we know this from journals, but an embargo is just saying, sending an email saying this isn't public until this date, which theoretically you've just made public by emailing somebody. So if it's really not public until that date, I would not email it to somebody. I would tell them. But generally, the gentleman's agreement is that you can send something saying this is under embargo. Are you interested in reporting on it? This is the day that the report comes out or the study is getting published in a journal, right? That's the usual thing. And but we can work with you to have something ready for that day. So people like advance notice. so that if there is significant research, that climate change is actually reversing at this moment, you might want to tell people, just say, I got this good thing that you might want to know about in advance. So that's how that works. Here's your email. Send it to one person, not lots of reporters or editors, because then nobody feels responsible for it. And everybody has to decide on it. It's a bit redundant. Figure out, just one person. You can copy other people who are maybe involved in it. Maybe the research director, people can answer questions about your availability, put them on that. And then a short and sweet subject line. I did a story once about something that might not have been in the subject line, but it was certainly in like the first sentence, about an entrepreneur who went on a self-imposed sabbatical. And I was like, well, that sounds like you're pretty full of yourself, going on a self-imposed sabbatical. But I was interested. I was like, so is that really, can you do a self-imposed, how does that work? And so, so I ended up doing this story, but it was a guy who was a CTO at a tech company. He saw a TED Talk about how you should spread your retirement out over your life and take a year off every 7 years. And he decided to do it. And he went and lived on an island off the coast of Norway. And while he was there eating seagull eggs, he learned to code, and he created an app that was so successful that he was making enough money every month that he didn't have to go back to a CTO job after the year away. So it was an interesting story. And had obviously drama. And it was one person doing something, going into the wilderness to come up with your idea, right? These are all archetypal things.
It's all about the seagull eggs.
Exactly. So anyway, but that hooked me on that one line where I was like, oh, self-employed, what is that? So as reporters, it's drudgery. We're doing a lot of the same work every day. We're sifting through things. We're looking for stuff that interests us because we get bored. And so if you can make something interesting for somebody, you've gone a long way because they can make it interesting for their audience. They know even better how to do that than you do. Just a few notes on why you won't get published, and then why you will. I think the last thing here is just think about after you get published or you do something, if it's a big deal or if it's good, a lot of other places are going to see it and they're going to want to cover it too because it's been in print but it hasn't been on the radio yet. So don't go on vacation the day after you do this, or make sure that your researcher is around, because in the following week or that day even, you could get follow-up places from other people and be like, oh, this is really good, this person should write for us, or we want to interview them for a story. So just be aware of the herd effect, the pack animal effect, and be prepared for it, because you don't want to did all this work to get your story in one place, and then you don't want to pass up just the natural really easy customer acquisition. You have very low customer acquisition costs all of a sudden, so take advantage of them.
And it can happen a lot.
Yeah.
Easily.
Yep.
Our story doesn't have to go viral for this to happen. People are looking, journalists are pack animals, like Curt said, and you're always looking for, that's how we find sources. We read articles, oh, here's a professor who's written, who's commented on this story. Maybe they'll write for me. Or they wrote this paper for the conversation. Oh, maybe they'll talk on NPR. And so it happens a lot where authors I work with publish something and then suddenly they get a bunch of media hits after that, and calls and things like that. So it doesn't always happen, but it can happen, and it's good to be ready for it to happen.
I just jump straight forward to past why to think.
Yeah, since we all know why we want to write to the public, right? So I'll run through this pretty quickly so that we can get to the more interesting part, which is the pitches. Talking about those, but so thinking like an editor, thinking like a reporter.
Just very briefly though, any questions at this point
Yeah.
Feel free to interrupt as we go along. Okay.
The first session, they interrupted us much more. They had more questions. But so...
I interrupted myself a lot.
I did too. So anyway, so he was talking about, Curt was talking about thinking about like a reporter. You know, for me, it would be thinking like an editor. Whatever that is. But so, kind of a quick question. When do you think the New York Times started its op-ed page?
What's that?
When did the New York Times start its op-ed page? And this is the first one in newspapers. 1970. It's pretty recent. And
Do you have a sense of how many the op-eds they get and how many they choose to?
oh, they got a
print?
lot.
I have my students bombard them, but I never get those.
So it's just using that sample size, we can probably extrapolate. But yeah, they get tons of stuff and they don't ever reply. We try to reply to every submission that comes our way. I don't know if you have the same kind of policy. We try to always reply to legitimate submissions of whatever kind.
There it says,
that you
if
can
we
use.
don't get back in 3 days, you can send it elsewhere.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, they get tons of stuff. But so, you know, what we do, we don't call ourselves op-eds. We really disdain the term when authors, academics come to us and say, I have an op-ed, because what we do, we don't want opinion. We don't want just your opinion. We want your facts. We want your evidence. We want your research. That's why conversation goes to you. Same thing probably with HBR.
Yeah, we'll do most of, yeah, we have a few different tracks at HBR. I'm talking mainly here about digital articles, which which we publish, 5 or more a day. And it's often about research or other things, but occasionally we'll do what we consider more op-ed-y type things, like, why Trump's NAFTA plan is terrible for the economy or something like that. So it's clearly like, that's an op-ed essentially, and that doesn't always have to be from the one person who did the research to show why this plan would,
Well, there's one yesterday from Elkington.
Yeah.
The bottom line.
Yeah. Okay.
So, what we want, I mean, in terms of either whether you're writing a story or reporters writing a story, they're going to write a article that's like that thing. But for when we're looking for submissions, HBR2, that's kind of the general range. Ours are a little bit longer. They go to like 1,000 words or 1,100 words because we want to explain a lot. I mean, we want to explain what things mean. We don't use jargon, so sometimes it takes longer to use a concept, to explain a concept.
That's not the pitch, that's the actual.
That's the word, that's the article.
The actual-
This is like
Oh
the
my
end
gosh.
result for like
Yeah, it should be 50 words or less.
If you look at the New York
For-
Times op-ed page, like most, like all the columnists are all like 800 words, like sharp, right in that range. Sometimes they run a longer opinion piece, but really that's often the sweet spot for a lot of journalism.
Because we're Harvard, smarter, our target length is 1,000 words.
Yeah.
On the online.
Yeah, on the online, yeah,
5,000.
That's what we tell people, and usually stuff comes in longer and we shorten it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have those quick things that are as short as 400, and,
Yeah, us too.
and we'll take it down if necessary, but usually 1,000 words is a nice target for us.
And
So,
usually plenty
anyway,
to
this is very similar.
yeah.
And the journal, HBR journal, would that be longer?
Yeah, that would be longer, although not necessarily, it could be a short thing about a study that's just really interesting.
But even the
That
long
you get a
ones,
lot of
the
credit.
5,000 book cuts.
Yeah. Yeah, so, but those articles vary, but typically, if you're looking at like a proper article, it's longer,
Yeah.
much longer, yeah.
And the rule of thumb I use with, length shouldn't be an excuse for an ability to make a point. So if an article is like a New Yorker style article, 5,000 words, you'll read those things from beginning to end because they're intense, they're deep, they're amazing, they're often written by experts themselves. So if it's really good, we won't go 5,000 words, but I would go longer because there's so much interesting stuff to say, and it's worth it. The topic's important, everything. But generally, it's getting your point across in fewer words is better,
Yeah.
and
Emphasis on point.
yeah, it's not an
Not
excuse
points.
for
Yeah, it's just, I think it's, I mean, if you look at hbr.org too, probably the same thing here, if you look at a headline, you can kind of tell like what the point is, or what's going to be discussed, and then it's basically that.
For those in like, but then you have to be entering a conversation. You're making a point and people have to have the background context, knowledge about what's you're making the point about.
Yeah, and then
We can get to that.
That's the article. Yeah,
That's the rest of the article.
Yeah. It could, but our headlines. I mean, it'd be interesting to go to the webpage if we wanted to later. But it's just going to be like, you know, what such and such fashion company learned about algorithms, right? And it's going to be like, you know, here's one thing they did. Here's something they discovered, and here's how they changed their business practice afterwards, and here's the result. And it's something that's a takeaway for other places. But it'll be, I don't know, why the NAFTA trade is, you know,
Why
trade
trade
goes
war is
back to the
terrible.
economy, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's people. That works well online for digital stuff because people see that in their feeds. They know what they're getting. It's not clickbaity, and they feel like, oh, I'm interested in that, so I'm going to read it. Where like a New Yorker article will have a headline that's not even clear what it's about, right? But it's, you know, but you're flipping through the magazine, you start looking, and it's a different thing. But online with digital articles, a clear headline that's intriguing, and promises something, and then you get to that promise in the first paragraph and then answer it in 1,000 words. That's sort of that's the market.
And it's a good way to crystallize the ideas you're thinking about. If you can write it in like 10 words, think, what is my idea? Like if I had to tell somebody, you know, what's it about and why it matters in 10 words, you know, just nothing, so short. You know, what would you say? Like, you know, to get their interest. If you can do that, you're more likely to get a reporter or editor's interest.
The article the article that you just referenced, the one from Elkington yesterday, I think the title was literally why I abandoned the term I coined, quote, the triple bottom line, unquote. That's the title.
So you need to retract this triple bottom line, something like that, right?
Yeah, I think it was why I abandoned it. But
So right to the point. Like,
yeah, it's like, so you know what you're going to get.
Well, yeah, you do know what you're going to get. What I like about that, it's got an I, right? So it says that it has a viewpoint. It has the history. It has something surprising, like you're famous. Why would you refute what made you famous? That's part of who you are. You know, it's got that sense to it. And and then it's also like a common, well-known thing too. So I think you have the authority to have an opinion about that because you invented it. And now, you know, you want people to stop using it. You regret what you unleashed on the world. Like those are the kinds of things people are thinking when they read that headline. That's why it's interesting.